I'll let it fall right in your lap.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm back. It's Wednesday, October 31st. Halloween. Boo. Oh, thanks. It's been a crazy day. It's about to get a lot crazier, which I'll tell you about in a second. First off, a little housekeeping. Public Service Electric and Gas returned the power to Newark last night. Almost all of it. A darn good job. Turns out the PSE&G president was on the phone with President Obama when he got word that the power was back on in Newark. So that was good timing. Otherwise, it's been no laughing matter in this area. As Governor Christie of New Jersey said, the level of devastation is beyond anything I ever thought I'd see. It's unthinkable. Just driving around my town of Summit again today, the devastation is actually beyond what we had with the freak Halloween snowstorm of last year. You recall that was incredibly heavy, wet snow on trees with the leaves still on them, and it took us all winter to begin to look normal from that storm. This is going to be horrific. I tried to get to my parents' house today. Finally did, after many a detour. But here are just some bullet points. I apologize, I'm not as organized as I want to be when I do these broadcasts. It really is exhausting to think how long it's going to take this region, and then down in Delaware and parts of Maryland and Virginia, and I imagine parts of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, how long it's going to take to bounce back. Every time a television crew can get to a new town, you just discover new problems. Yesterday's big issue was this town of Moonachie, which is in the Meadowlands area, where the tidal surge that has never happened before. They never thought it would happen. It went over a berm and flooded all 2,500 homes in the community. It's just astounding. Richard Lefrak of the Lefrak organization, one of the largest real estate operators, developers in the world. He was on CNBC this morning. He basically owns all of Battery Park City that you see all the pictures of, and that whole area is out of power. But he said tens and tens of millions just for his buildings alone to repair the infrastructure. The power is just gone. Totally compromised because of the seawater. 19,500 flights canceled so far. That has an economic impact. A seventh body was found on Staten Island. That's one area that's being underreported. The town I've lived in 4 different times in my life, Hoboken, right across the river from Manhattan. Of course, it's the main PATH station, the subway line that takes commuters into Manhattan from New Jersey. Hoboken is known to be the mile square city because it's literally a mile square. It has about 50,000 residents. Press finally got in there this morning, found that 20,000 have been flooded out, 20 of the 50,000, and they're in like knee deep in some areas, totally contaminated water. Combination of the ocean, the Hudson River, and the sewage backed up. Just unbelievably disgusting. And just imagine how long it'll take those 20,000 to get their lives back to normal. Of course, many of them will just move out. As of a few hours ago, 8 million residences, and that's what always kind of cracks me up here, that say 8 million up without power. That's 8 million homes or 8 million businesses. So it could be 16 million people, it could be 20 million people. As far as the storm cost, which I talked about yesterday, you know, you have to be careful. More and more seem to be coming around to a $50 billion figure for starters, which will have a negative impact on GDP. This is not going to unleash a ton of pent-up demand like some economists gloriously said on Monday. Sure, again, Home Depot's going to do well, Lowe's is going to do well, people who make garbage bags are going to do well. You know that company I mentioned yesterday, Generic, or I think I'm pronouncing it right, GNRC, that makes generators, that's basically their sole business. The stock went up 20% today, $5.72. I'm not recommending it. I just told you yesterday I thought it'd be interesting to follow, and it will be interesting to follow going forward. A lot of jerks on Twitter. That's a random musing of mine. Here's what cracks me up. Every politician, of course, loves to get in front of a camera and talk about the resilience of Americans, as if we're different than any other people in the world when it comes to natural disasters and dealing with them. Everybody's resilient, to a certain extent. You know who's really resilient? Bangladeshis. Every year they deal with the monsoon. Yeah, the water comes in, and they find their little clump on a hill, clump of dirt, and they sit there until the water recedes. And then they repeat it the next year. Now that's resilience. Back in Summit, my town, got a message from the mayor today that we're going to be without power. Everybody except me, it seems, literally about 2 blocks here and a portion of downtown Summit. Every place else is without power. So everybody else in town is going to be without power for at least 7 to 10 days. Our schools are officially closed for Thursday and Friday, so that'll be a full week with the schools out. Same issue all over the state. 90% of people on Long Island are without power as of this morning. Con Edison, which is in charge of New York City, an all-time record for them, at least 660,000 households. But guess who's coming to dinner in about 20 minutes? My parents. And they're going to stay because they have no power. So they could be staying for 7 to 10 days. And that just cracks me up. And those who know me well know how much it cracks me up. So, apologize if you can hear an alarm in the background. That's not an alarm announcing them. So the stock market was closed Monday and Tuesday. Let me just keep track of time here. It's closed Monday and Tuesday. Dow Jones finished down 10 points. S&P 500 is unchanged. NASDAQ was down 10 points. So totally uneventful day, which is good. Trading volume should be very lackluster for Thursday and Friday. Just a ton of people cannot make it into New York or their offices in the tri-state area. Overseas, London was down 1%. Frankfurt DAX was down 0.3%. The news out of Europe was not good today. The 17-nation euro area jobless rate hit a new high of 11.6% in September. That's since 1995 when they started keeping such data. Now this is Eurostat, the official statistics agency for the EU. Spain's unemployment rate, according to Eurostat, is 25.8%. The Spanish government has it at 25.1%. Spain's youth unemployment rate is now 54.2%. 54.2%. And of course, it's over 50% in Greece. Unemployment rate in Portugal, 15.7. Ireland, 15.1. France, 10.8. But Austria is at 4.4. And they make the best Wiener Schnitzel in Austria. Air France KLM Group said it is seeking 1,300 job cuts at the KLM unit. This is after already announcing 5,000 cuts at Air France. In Greece, the government announced the GDP will shrink 4.5% next year instead of the 3.8% they've previously predicted, which would mean that since 2008, the cumulative decline in Greece's GDP would be 22%. Greece says their total debt will rise to 189% of GDP, 189% of GDP next year. They're supposed to be on the way down to 120%, not up to 189. At the same time, they're trying to convince the Troika, which is the European Commission, European Central Bank, and IMF, that they should be lent another 31.5 billion euro, part of their 240 billion bailout. Started with 110 and second phase 130. This 31.5 is what they call a tranche of that 130. Greece is going to run out of cash by end of November unless they get this 31 billion. And they need to convince the Troika that they should get it. And so the Troika says, well, you have to introduce some more austerity programs, and so far Parliament is barely passing a series of programs. They have one or two more steps, and the coalition appears to be shattering. Euro finance ministers meet on November 12 to conclude whether or not to grant the aid. Prime Minister Antonis Samaras of Greece, he wants an extra 2 years until 2016 to meet various deficit targets, but that would entail more aid. So do you think the likes of Germany, Finland, Netherlands want to grant Greece more aid than already stipulated in the first two bailouts? I don't think so. Spain, on the positive side, said their government deficit narrowed through September to just 4.4% of GDP, thanks to a new value-added tax. That sounds good, but that is the central government's GDP or deficit figure. It doesn't really address the 17 regions which the central government is responsible for, and the regions continue to bleed and ask for bailouts from the central government. The central government has a bailout fund for the regions. It will be exceeded shortly. So that's not good. There was some good news out of Italy. They had two successful bond auctions for 5- and 10-year paper at the lowest yield since May of 2011. But also in Europe, Fiat, which of course is the Italian car maker that controls Chrysler Group, CEO Sergio Marchionne said, events of the past 12 months have reinforced our negative view of the development of the European markets. We see continuing weak trading conditions for the remainder of 2012, extending well into 2013 and at least part of 2014. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize-winning economist and professor at Columbia University, said in an interview on Bloomberg Television that he's, quote, very pessimistic about the prospects of a European recovery. UBS announced, as I wrote in my last week in review, they formalized total job cuts of 10,000 across its businesses as they seek to exit from investment banking and fixed income trading, which is a real positive for JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup, among others, who are big in the fixed income area, Deutsche Bank as well, Barclays. But I got a kick out of this. This is from the Financial Times today. Some 100 of UBS's fixed income traders in London discovered at the turnstiles that their passes were no longer working this morning when they tried to get to work. Other bankers have been contacted by phone or discovered that they might lose their jobs when their email repeatedly bounced. Carrie Cooper, a professor of organizational psychology and health at Lancaster University, I'm assuming that's in England, said this is bad business practice as much as it is bad human behavior on the part of UBS. Panasonic announced a net loss for the third quarter of just $9 billion, and they said for the year ending in March they will lose $10 billion, which was about twice what analysts had expected. And so the managing director at Panasonic said, "We apologize for such a big gap in our outlook. The slump in the digital consumer market was dramatic." I'll address more Panasonic in the upcoming week in review. Dow Chemical said it was going to be cutting 3,000 jobs. They had announced last week they would be laying off a certain number, and they clarified it, quantified it, 3,000. U.S. newspaper circulation decreased 0.2% for the year or period ending September 30th versus a year earlier, but Sunday circulation rose. That's good. And at the Wall Street Journal, weekday circulation as of September 30th was up 9.4% from a year earlier. That's pretty cool. USA Today, which as you've noticed is totally revamping their operation to become more of a almost totally digital paper. They're still number 2 in the country. The Journal's number 1. USA Today is number 2. But their circulation declined 3.9%, and the New York Times is number 3. But their daily newspaper editions are down. However, they're doing quite well. Let me back up on that. New York Times retained number 3 rank at 1.6 million weekday readers, an improvement of 40%, but this is deceiving, and continue to have the highest Sunday circulation, up 28%. I need to double check that. That doesn't seem to make sense. On the presidential poll front, I described some yesterday that reflected two different polls that came in with ties. I think there's a Pew Research poll and Washington Post ABC poll. Well, the New York Times CBS News released a poll today. 48-47 Obama, a tie. Obama in this one leads among women 52-44. Remember, that's 8 points. Against McCain, it was 13. Romney is leading among men 51-44. And the Times CBS News poll had an interesting little tidbit here. Found that only 38% of voters approved and 51% disapproved of the administration's handling of the attacks on the consulate in Benghazi. But I think at this point the administration is in the midst of successfully running out the clock on that issue. Well, that's all for tonight. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Thursday. Might have my parents in the audience. And as always, go to stocksnews.com for more information remember to keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and say a prayer for a lot of the folks in this area who are suffering big time. Take care.